Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sweeney Gray, and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Tell Us Your English. And we start this new edition right now. Thank you for joining us. The ceasefire between the ELN and the Colombian government is set to expire at midnight on Tuesday. The two groups are meeting in neighboring Ecuador for their fifth round of peace agreement negotiations. This despite the ELN's desire to negotiate the parts of the agreement which have been brief or proven problematic in the last 100 days of the existing ceasefire. There have been calls of support from all sides to extend it. Human rights organizations are also calling for a continuation of the agreement, which they say has already saved lives. And our correspondent, Lorena Hoyos, has more from Bogotá.
Compañeros, buenas tardes. Hoy a las 12 de la noche finaliza el cese al fuego bilateral que rigió durante 3 meses.
Fire between Colombia's government and the National Liberation Army that lasted for 3 months is coming to an end. Both sides are in Quito, Ecuador to take part in the 5th round of negotiation sessions, although nobody has made an announcement on a possible ceasefire extension yet. In the morning, Pablo Beltrán, delegate from the negotiation team of the National Liberation Army, said that during these new meetings both sides will debate the ceasefire, the difficulties they both had to face during these 3 months, and how to overcome these difficulties in order to negotiate a new ceasefire agreement to help during the peace talks. Several social organizations have sent letters to President Juan Manuel Santos and to the leader of the ELN, Nicolás Rodríguez Bautista, about the importance of maintaining the ceasefire in order to protect the communities affected by the armed conflict. There is a lot of uncertainty among the people because the ceasefire is coming to an end, especially as they have recognized the positive impact this measure has had so far in the communities and that it has avoided the death of at least 95 Colombians and the injuries of at least 400 more.
Lorena Hoyos with that report. Speaking from Quito, the head of the ELN's negotiation team, Pablo Beltrán, has announced that there is consensus on the need to extend the ceasefire.
The military high command has announced that once the ceasefire is finished, they will give the green light to new offensive operations. So we have activated the whole ELN group to be on alert. Because if there is an announcement of possible offensive operations, it means that we must strengthen our security measures. There are severe breaches on the FARC peace agreements. What that means to us is that if it's happening to the FARC group, it will happen to us as well.
The Foreign Minister of Ecuador, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, says the country is seeking the mediation of a third country so that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Espinosa also said Ecuador will continue to protect Assange and had no intention of removing him from the embassy, where he has spent the last 5 years.
How would you feel after 5 years of being confined inside a little office without having proper sunlight and not being able to breathe fresh air? Even people who are in prison can go out and exercise or play sports. This doesn't happen for Julian Assange. His captivity conditions are very complicated. The UN Anti-Arbitrary Detention Group has said that he's detained under an arbitrary situation. The Ecuadorian government protection hasn't changed. We will continue to protect Julian Assange while his physical and psychological conditions are in danger. We are looking for different options in order to find a solution for this situation. We are considering the possibility of a mediation process. None of these well-known emblematic cases of asylum haven't been resolved without the cooperation of the involved countries, and sometimes the mediation of a third-party country. We are trying to find solutions for this case. From a human rights point of view, he cannot live forever under these conditions.
Venezuelan Vice President Tareck El Assaimi has announced that all sea and air links with Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire will remain closed until a high-level meeting with the island's authorities take place. It's now known that that meeting will take place on Friday, but until then, it's unlikely that the Barcadero port in Aruba Aruba will not remain empty, the result of President Nicolas Maduro's closing Venezuela's borders with Aruba and the other islands. Just a few weeks ago, the port was full of copper, wire, and other materials that Maduro said were being smuggled from Venezuela. Our special correspondent, Madeline Garcia, has the latest from Aruba.
Venezuela's government has decided to extend the 3-day suspension of all sea and air links and all commercial activities with Aruba, Caracoy, and Bonaire until a meeting is set up between these nations to coordinate different measures to control all smuggling activities. A spokesperson from Aruba's government said that they are aware of this problem and they are willing to cooperate with Venezuela to handle this issue. Aruba's officials have also said that they will look again at their laws, since in the island it is not forbidden to sell copper that comes from abroad, and it doesn't matter how it got to the island. Aruba is the biggest exporter of copper from the Caribbean, despite the fact that they don't produce or have this mineral. The same is happening with gold, yet another mineral that is being smuggled from Venezuela. We will keep you informed.
Today marks the 54th anniversary of the death of the January martyrs, a group of Panamanians who died after demanding that their country's flag be raised over the land occupied by the United States in the Canal. Their memory fuels social movements' fight for justice to this day.
Today, social movements march to commemorate the anniversary of the deaths of the January martyrs, a day that has great significance in Panama's right for sovereignty.
We are here on this historic date to remember the martyrs that died for our sovereignty, which was a fundamental basis to reclaim the canal as our own. Their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Our actions will reclaim their sacrifice against privatization, against neoliberalism, and corruption.
On January 9, 1964, a group of students went to occupied land to demand Panama's flag be raised. In response to their heroism, over 5,000 members of the United States Army massacred 21 Panamanian citizens.
These were young people who detonated all the resentment that had been building up against the American occupation and against our country's submission. We celebrate the anniversary of their heroic act by retaking and protecting our national sovereignty, and by saying no to corrupt politicians who want to appropriate this date for their circus.
People are being called to rescue this historic memory, since events such as these can easily be erased from the national consciousness in order to dissuade citizen action.
There is a well-planned strategy to erase our country's collective and historic memory, to guarantee that during elections and social resistance, they will have enough sheep.
The martyrs' fight is to attain the sovereignty they died for, to secure Panamanians' well-being, something that, half a century later, has yet to be achieved.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Months after a large earthquake hit Mexico, the housing market has seen a drastic change. We go to our correspondent, Pablo Perez, in Mexico City for more information.
One of the most noticeable effects of the September 19 earthquakes here in Mexico City is on the housing and real estate market. It's noticeable that because some areas in the city have raised its value, the value of its housing and rent, up to 40%, while some others, the zones that were the most affected by the earthquake, where the most buildings collapsed, have experienced what some people call an exodus of people that is trying to find housing in what they consider safer places, while real estate companies are trying to speculate with the future value of the vacant lots of the collapsed buildings. Also, in cases where the buildings were so badly damaged that they are deemed to be demolished, the government has agreed with the real estate companies to rebuild those buildings, but now with more departments, even if they have lesser space, more departments, so the new owners pay for those new departments, are going to pay for the whole construction cost, which some specialists, some analysts say it's a way the government is giving an opportunity for real estate companies to get more money out of the catastrophe that was the September 19 earthquake. These are the news here from Mexico City. We go back to you.
And now to learn how an increase in violence in Mexico is affecting July's general election, let's take a look in this report.
In the face of the government's lack of action, representatives from the parties in the running for Mexico City's government have found themselves forced to sign a civility agreement.
The civility agreement is a pact between the city's government and the political parties to guarantee freedoms as established by the law.
The Electoral Institute oversees political parties' adherence to the law. According to experts, the Institute's advisors have not been efficient in previous elections.
I
think they're going to fall short of the job required of them because the people are even more demanding. In other occasions, they haven't shown the necessary willpower to put political parties and interested parties in their place.
As soon as pre-campaigning started, violence erupted against Morena's candidate.
Sympathizers of the PRD attacked us here in Cayocan. They jumped us from behind. They're all cowards.
These attacks took place in Coyoacan's delegation, supposedly between friendly parties. The outcome was the death of a Morena sympathizer. Morena has so far been leading the polls.
Fueron también agredidos no solo militantes de Morena el día de hoy.
Those attacked were not just Morena militants, but journalists as well. We stand in solidarity with them. We reject the violence that happened on that day. It was an attack on our freedoms, freedoms Mexico City has always been at the forefront of.
Entre otros, que son derechos en los que la Ciudad de México se ha visto siempre a la vanguardia, siempre avanzada.
Mexico City's government is considered to be the second most important electoral slot. In 1997, it stopped being a position granted by presidential decree and has since only been led by left and center-left representatives.
The political crisis in Peru has damaged the political movement founded by Alberto Fujimori, the former leader who was pardoned just before Christmas. Political analysts say the movement has suffered an internal split which could jeopardize his children's political aspirations.
Peru's Congress has often been the stage for the fight between members of the Fujimorismo movement, two different groups led by Keiko and Kenji Fujimori.
It's time for Kenji to grow up and to look for his own political path.
My parliamentary group wants to remove me.
The movement's crisis deepened after Kenji Fujimori and other 9 congressmen didn't respect the agreement reached with their parliamentary group and voted against President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, all to free Alberto Fujimori.
La agenda de Alberto Fujimori es mantenerse afuera.
Alberto Fujimori's agenda focuses on remaining out of jail and to keep his promises with Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. Keiko Fujimori, his daughter, has a different objective. She wants to avoid being arrested and wants an option to hold the top position.
Librar la cárcel y tentar ser una opción de gobierno.
But the group that is following Kenji Fujimori has become even bigger, with 25 congressmen supporting him. Analyst Alberto Andreasen said that Keiko Fujimori is losing power in Congress, as well as her political influence with his father out of jail.
The future of the Fujimorismo movement as we know it is uncertain. Maybe we are even looking at the end of Fujimorismo because of the internal crisis the movement is facing.
This political crisis has also influenced the people.
I think that Keiko has other interests besides politics, and that her brother Kenji has only family interests.
I think this is a media strategy to distract the country from other things.
Meanwhile, Alberto Fujimori is enjoying his freedom and is sending messages on social media, giving his opinion about what is happening in Peru. Despite after being pardoned, he said that he would take a step back from politics.
About 52 million Brazilians, a quarter of the country's population, live in poverty, with 13 million of those in extreme poverty. A new report by the Brazilian Institute for Geography and Statistics says that social inequality has deepened in the South American giant.
Marcos and his family are in Brasilia, camping on the outskirts of a middle-class district. He and his partner are unemployed. They have 4 children and don't have resources to pay rent for housing.
I am unemployed and I am from the north of the country. I came with my family to seek help because the situation in Brazil is critical and we need help.
Very close to Marcos, there is a dozen of families in similar situation. Some work informally to survive.
We are trying to get work. In the meantime, we are recycling, but we can also work in construction to earn something. But if we don't have anything, we stay here because the audit agency comes and takes our things and leaves us with nothing.
Between 2004 and 2014, tens of millions of Brazilians came out of poverty. The former Minister of Social Development and Fight Against Hunger, Teresa Campello, explains that this trend has been reversed in the last couple of years as a result of the recession, and above all, due to the neoliberal economic policy driven by President Michel Temer.
We are seeing big losses because the health, education and social assistance expenses are cut. With that, the poor people are losing jobs, and that forces them to work informally. That leads them to poverty. And even living in poverty, there is no help from the government.
According to economists, an unfair tax system is also another cause of social inequality. The Federal Council of Economy and other civil society organizations launched a campaign to make a tax reform that allowed a better distribution of the resources.
The mechanisms of accentuation and perpetuation of social inequality are various, but I don't have any doubts that the main mechanism is the tax model, the tax system that we have, because it's characterized by its aggressiveness. In a simple way, this means that those who pay taxes in Brazil are the poorest, the workers and the middle class, while the rich don't pay taxes.
Recent investigations indicate that 6 Brazilians have the same wealth of half of the population and that poverty affects women more than men. Also, more Afro-Brazilians than Caucasian Brazilians. This is the country with the highest income concentration in the world, and the current government does little to reverse it.
And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Unrest broke out at the funeral for the U.S. activist Erica Garner, the daughter of police brutality victim Eric Garner. The scuffle happened outside the First Corinthians Baptist Church in Harlem, New York, after security forces prevented Erica Garner's grandmother, Gwen Carr, from entering the building. The president of Black Lives Matter New York, Hawk Newsom, expressed outrage that she was not allowed to attend the funeral ceremony.
Like these folks in here hosting this funeral. Not dollars like the pimp Al Sharpton. Not dollars like these people who make millions off of our sorrow. She was a justice warrior. Gwen Carr is a warrior for justice. She deserves to be in that building. This is an abomination to the whole movement. And it shall not be tolerated. I'm ashamed of everything that happened. She should be heartbroken. And Erica is turning over in her grave. God rest her soul.
The Trump administration is canceling permits allowing some 200,000 people from El Salvador to live and work in the United States. They must leave the country by 2019 or face deportation. The Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, was granted to Salvadorians after a series of earthquakes rocked El Salvador in 2001, leaving hundreds of thousands in the country homeless. It's the 4th country named by the Trump administration in 4 months to lose protection under the TPS program, which since 1990 has provided deportation relief to many immigrants.
President Trump and to the world that we...
Palestinian protesters have clashed with Israeli forces in response to the approval of hundreds of new illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. Heavily armed Israeli forces were seen chasing young children after some of them threw stones at them. Israeli authorities are due to approve on Wednesday the construction of 1,285 housing units to be built in 2018 and advance planning for about 2,500 others in about 20 different settlements. Palestinians are also protesting against a new Israeli law which will allow the death penalty to be handed out to those labeled as terrorists. People marched through the Gaza Strip outraged by the announcement, burning images of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump. Rights groups in Palestine and a number of international organizations fear the extension of capital punishment will unfairly target Palestinians.
Today we confirm that this intifada and its escalation will continue until the fall of U.S. President Donald Trump's decision and the law.
Demonstrators gathered outside the headquarters of the Red Crescent in Gaza City on Monday to demand Israel release Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi and all other female prisoners. Our Palestinian correspondent Noor Harazin files this report. Oh, we're going to have that go back to that that report in a few minutes. However, Jair Netanyahu, son of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin, has been caught on wiretap talking about how his father helped to push through a business deal worth millions. The conversation was taped outside a strip club between Netanyahu's son and the son of a gas tycoon, Bobby Mammon, who's a shareholder in a company that owns Israel's Tamar gas fields. The scandal comes at a particularly bad time for the Prime Minister, who is already the subject of 2 open corruption investigations.
The state of Israel and your colleagues.
Demonstrators gathered outside the headquarters of the Red Crescent in Gaza City on Monday to demand Israel release Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi and all other female prisoners. We now have the report from our Palestinian correspondent, Noor Harazin.
The General Union of Palestinian Women organized a sit-in protest outside the headquarters of the International Committee of the Red Cross in Western Gaza City on Monday in support of detained Palestinian teen Ahed Tamimi and all women prisoners in Israeli jails.
We basically came here today to support all the female Palestinian detainees in Israeli jails in general, and Ahed al-Tamimi in particular, and also to expose the crimes of the Israeli occupation forces committed against the Palestinian people, including children. The General Union of Palestinian Women came here today to renew the covenant with our prisoners and Jerusalem, the eternal capital of Palestine.
On December 19, Ahed Tamimi was arrested by Israeli forces outside her family home in the Nabi Saleh village in northwest Ramallah. The incident occurred a few days after the Palestinian teen was filmed shouting, pushing, and stabbing an Israeli soldier. Her mother and cousin were also arrested shortly afterwards. The case, which has attracted worldwide attention and produced an uproar in Israel, has also made Ahed an iconic hero for Palestinians and non-Palestinians. On December 25, an Israeli military court extended the detention of Ahed and her mother for further questioning, the second extension in less than 2 weeks. A new report issued by Defense for Children International said that 72% out of 250 cases of Palestinian children who were detained by Israel between 2012 and 2016 faced physical violence, and 66% experienced verbal abuse and humiliation. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
Greek demonstrators have stormed the Labour Ministry to protest legislation which restricts the right to strike, a condition set by international creditors in exchange for bailout funds. Thousands of protesters rallied outside the ministry, hanging banners saying, "Hands off strikes, it's a workers' right." After breaking into the building, protesters came face to face with Labour Minister Efi Aksoglu and demanded that she stop the initiative.
Take this bill back immediately, today, because you should know, as you are a young person, that blood has been spilled for the right to strike. our forefathers gave their blood.
We have discussed this. No, we will not take it back.
29 people have been killed and more than 13,000 displaced in Madagascar by tropical cyclone Eva. The cyclone hit the coastal city of Tuamasinin in the east of the country, with winds up to 150 kilometers. Strong winds and rain flooded the city, and the country now faces the possibility of more floods and landslides. And an update on global news now, starting in Tunisia.
Nationwide demonstrations against the government's 2018 budget look set to continue in Tunisia, where opposition are calling for further protests that have already claimed one life and seen over 40 people arrested. The government has raised the price of petrol and hiked taxes on cars, phone calls, internet usage and hotel accommodation as part of the New Year's economic reforms to satisfy its 4-year loan program with the International Monetary Fund.
Our demands are the following: suspend the 2018 finance law, return to the original prices of goods, and hire one member from every poor family. These are, in short, our demands.
What happened yesterday is a violation of the law, since the state of emergency has been declared in Tunisia. These protests are the result of operations that aim to revive social unrest on social media.
South Korea will not ask Tokyo to revise a bilateral pact on settling Japan's wartime sex slavery of Korean women, despite its new president, Moon Jae-in, saying that he could not accept the agreement when he was on the campaign trail. The Japanese government still denies it's directly responsible, insisting that comfort women were recruited by civilians and that the army brothels were commercially operated. Meanwhile, the South Korean ambassador to the United Kingdom has said during an event in London that the Winter Olympics could be a turning point in de-escalating tensions with North Korea.
I believe that we can make Pyeongchang Winter Olympics as a kind of a turning point in de-escalating tension on the Korean Peninsula and engaging in direct dialogue and exchanges with the North, and further creating an environment conducive to more serious negotiation on nuclear and ballistic missile issues.
Former Arizona sheriff and Trump ally Joe Arpaio, known for his tough stance on illegal immigration, has announced that he will run for the U.S. Senate to replace retiring Republican Senator Jeff Flake. On his Twitter account, he said that he is running for one unwavering reason: to support the agenda and policies of President Donald Trump in his mission to make America great again.
We've come to the end of this evening's news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
It is time to stop and listen to ourselves.